Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're just looking at 3 verses, Colossians chapter 1 verses 15 through 17. So even though it's really short, this is a super thick passage. I was actually originally going to do verses 15 through 20, but as I was studying, I realized that there's no way that I could fit all of that into just one short episode. So we're just doing 15 through 17. Just to give you a little bit of background, again, Paul is writing to the church in Colossae from prison in Rome. He met them through Epaphras. He hasn't actually met them in person, but he's heard about them and they know about Paul. And in the previous passage, we found that Paul was just being thankful for them and telling them how he was praying for them. And then he got distracted when he started praying that they would grow in thankfulness because his brain went toward the gospel. And when his brain goes toward the gospel, his brain also goes towards Jesus. And that's who we're talking about today. In this passage, we're focusing on the idea of the pre-incarnate Son. What I mean by that fancy term is this is Jesus before he was Jesus. This is the Son of God before he came down to be a human. Remember, he was never created. He is fully God, but he is not the Father and he is not the Spirit, yet there is one God. That's just Trinitarian theology. It's a little wild. Now, the reason this passage is super thick is because there's a lot of theology in it. And I want to just briefly explain each of these little phrases bit by bit, just so you're not completely lost as to what Paul is saying. So the first is in verse 15 when he says he is the image of the invisible God. This term, the image of the invisible God, is probably easiest to explain in terms of function, what it means that the Son does. So God is invisible. No one has ever seen God, but God the Father reveals himself through the Son. That's what we find in John's Gospel, chapter 14, when Jesus says, "If you have seen me, you have seen the Father," because Jesus is the exact representation of the Father. The Son of God perfectly displays the invisible God. And this is true of humans as well in a similar way because we're made in the image of God. And part of understanding our place as humans is realizing that we're supposed to reflect God to the world. We're supposed to show the world who our Creator is. That was the point of God creating Adam and Eve in his image. The second term is in the same verse, verse 15. He is also the firstborn over all creation. Now, what this doesn't mean is that Paul isn't saying that Jesus was created at some point. That's what a lot of cults say. These cults that deny that Jesus is fully God because they say that he was created. That's not true, and that's not what Paul is saying. When Paul says that he is the firstborn of all creation, he's saying that he has first place. He has preeminence. He has the greatest significance over all creation. And then in verse 16, when Paul mentions thrones, dominions, powers, these refer to physical, earthly powers and governments and rulers, but it also refers to the spiritual realm. It refers to angels, it refers to demons, whatever powers there are. He's saying that he is over all of these powers. In verse 17, when Paul says that he is before all things, he's saying that Jesus came before all things. This is a temporal idea, that he was there before everything else existed. And again, this is just another point that Paul is making that Jesus is pre-creation. He is uncreated. And then the last is in verse 17. He says, "In him all things hold together." This is Paul demonstrating Jesus' power in a very short phrase. He says that the Son of God holds all of created existence together. And what he means by that is if he stops holding creation together, creation stops existing. The reason why we exist and continue to exist at any given point is because the Son of God keeps us existing. This is a demonstration not only of Jesus' power in creation, but also his power in sustaining creation. Now, to give you a question to focus on while you read this and sit on it for yourself, ask yourself, how does this passage present Jesus to you? Think about that while you read. Come back whenever you're ready, and I'll give you a takeaway. Welcome back. I hope you got to think a little bit on that. It is a very heavy topic. I spent a long time in seminary just learning about Jesus, and this was a huge part of it. Now, for your takeaway, how does this passage present Jesus to us? Well, if you think about the Bible in general, we learn about Jesus from typically 2 different angles. We learn about Jesus in the Gospels, mostly focused on his humanity. We focus on the humble life that he lived, the death that he died, him understanding us, being a sympathetic high priest like it says in Hebrews. But this passage in Colossians is on the other side of the spectrum, where we're not focused on his humanity at all. We're focused on him being God. This is the Son of God, through whom everything was created and by whom everything continues to exist. There is power in him. There is majesty and glory that is above anything else in creation. And this is one of those passages that's supposed to help us remember who it is that we worship and also who it is that has saved us and called us his friends. So this should really influence the way that we think of him, how we worship him, how we even talk to him. There should be familiarity because he does approach us as a friend, but also with a lot of reverence and respect because at the end of the day, he is God. So I hope this was a helpful time to think about who Jesus is. I'll see you next time.